Thermalin Incorporated. And Rick, why don't you talk about your company, introduce yourself, tell us what you guys are doing, and about your new treatments for insulin dependency.
Great. Well, Marty, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to present about Thermalin. So this is a real change from the last presentation because we're talking about an opportunity for direct investment for people who are looking to have a significant impact on a major scourge in the world, which is diabetes. So what I'd like to talk about is how Thermalin has a plan and a technology that's going to radically change how we treat people with insulin-dependent diabetes. That's type 1 and type 2. So just a high-level summary, Thermalin has put together what I think, and I'm really proud of this team, of deep insulin experts with a goal of creating disruptive therapies to transform the basic economics of the $30 billion annual insulin therapy market. The key to our doing this is our novel stabilized insulin analog. This is a new type of insulin, we call it T1123, that's going to enable innovations in what we call glucose management systems. A good example of a glucose management system is the stamp pump, which is 4 times smaller than any other system that's available or in development today, and only possible because of T1123. We're currently putting together a funding round that will total around 22 million, although we're looking for a closing of around 10 to 13 in the next 6 months or so. We have a major pharma that is signed up to participate in this. The goal of this financing is to get the clinical proof of efficacy, a preclinical demonstration of the stamp pump device itself, a number of partnerships in place that will get us to a key value inflection point in the next 3 years. So that's the high-level summary. Let me now step back and walk you through a little bit more detail. First, let me introduce you to the team. So I'm Rick Berenson. I'm the CEO, co-founder with Mike Weiss. Mike Weiss, who's just down to my left here, is the chairman of biochemistry and molecular biology at Indiana University. He's really considered the world's expert in the structure and function of the insulin molecule. He also is responsible for a number of key innovations in how you make insulin, how you change the way the molecule works in order to get better results. My chief scientific officer is Dodd Michael. Dodd is the former head of insulin biology discovery at Eli Lilly, a metabolic physiologist who's expert in how insulin affects both animals and people. My chief engineer is Dwight Meglin. Dwight is a former Medtronic technical fellow, which means he was vice president level with no reports. When he left Medtronic a couple of years ago, they immediately hired him back as a consultant with no intellectual property restrictions, just to keep access to him because that's how good he is. And then finally, I'll just mention Jim Malone, who, before he retired from Eli Lilly, was the head of clinical development for insulin products and delivery systems. And I suppose I should also throw in John Brooks. John is our chairman. He's the former CEO of Harvard's Diabetes Center, the Joslin Diabetes Center. So I'll just also mention that Mike Weiss, who's got a ton of publications in this area, was awarded the Grotzky Award by Juvenile Diabetes Research. This is their highest award for advances in basic science related to diabetes. So let me first talk about our economic proposition. Diabetes is fundamentally a disease of insufficient. Type 1 diabetes, you don't have any.
I know you won't.
25% of the people.
You good about those things because I got my last flu shot. I think.
Sorry, there's somebody who hasn't muted. Could I bother to ask you to mute, please?
And in fact, I don't know if there'll be a run on it this year. There could be.
Yeah, like there was.
But
I'll keep talking, but it's maybe a little difficult for people to hear. Well, that's better. Thank you very much. So, since diabetes is a disease of insufficient insulin, you would think that the obvious therapy would be to give people supplemental insulin. However, insulin therapy today is a very high burden therapy. You have to get exactly the right dose at exactly the right time. It involves lots of measuring and calculating and so forth, and the consequence is that people just don't adhere well because it's so difficult. This means that they chronically don't have enough insulin, their blood sugar is chronically high, and this leads to all the complications that accounts for 88% of the $800 billion a year cost of caring for people with diabetes. So if we can lower the burden of insulin therapy, we can lower the rate of complications and dramatically lower the cost of caring for these patients. The key to doing this is automating the dosing process. And we're not the first ones to think about this. There are people who are developing smarter pumps and smarter pens, and are trying to make the devices easier to use. However, these devices still don't do a great job in calculating the dose correctly. They only last a couple of days. The user has to fill them by hand with insulin, which is actually about half the work involved in taking care of an insulin delivery device each day. And they have to wear a second device called the continuous glucose monitor to measure how high their blood sugar is. Our technology is going to let us get better control with a device that's 25% the size of any other device in development or on the market. And it will last a full 7 days on top of that. It will be filled at the factory with insulin, so no filling by hand. And in the second generation, it will have the glucose monitoring built into it. So just to quickly review our pipeline, the key to enable all of this is T1123, which is our stabilized ultra-rapid acting insulin. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. It has several formulations in the pipeline. One is a regular concentration formulation, and the second is a high concentration formulation. This is the first time insulin has been able to be concentrated to 5 times normal and still be rapid acting, let alone ultra rapid acting as ours will be. And this formulation C here on the list is what is enabling the stamp pump, which is the second program down at the bottom. We have a couple of other programs in the pipeline, but our focus today is on these 2 programs. Just to put our insulin in context, there are other people, significant companies with rapid-acting insulins on the market. Lilly, Novo Nordisk, and Sanofi all have rapid-acting insulins. Both Lilly and Sanofi have reformulated their insulins recently to make them faster or ultra-rapid-acting. All of our programs will be at least ultra-rapid-acting. Where we differentiate is on stability, for one. Existing insulins are only stable at room temperature for about 30 days. That's what the FDA gives them. Ours will be stable for at least 6 months. Now that's key to enabling the pre-filling of insulin devices, which we'll talk about in a moment. The second differentiation, as I said, is that we're going to be 5 times as concentrated, yet still ultra-rapid acting, the first insulin that's had those characteristics. And that's key to enabling the miniaturization of these devices. So our focus in insulin innovation has been making devices more convenient for patients by getting over the limitations of existing insulins. So let me just give you a little bit of data. First of all, this insulin is dramatically more stable than the existing insulins. And you can see this on the chart on the left. You can see that in the gray, these are all existing commercial insulins. And the most stable in this particular assay is this is an accelerated assay where we really put the insulin to the stability test. It's done at very high temperature, which is over 100 degrees. It's agitated, shaken very vigorously. And in these conditions, these insulins all begin to degrade in between 7 and 16 hours. Our insulins, both formulations in these conditions, last more than a week. So we're at least 10 times as stable against this type of degradation, which is the main degradation path for insulin, than any existing commercialized insulin. The other nice thing about this insulin is that it has a lower rate of what's called cell growth stimulation. So all insulins are what are called growth factors. And this means that they cause cells to divide more frequently. In fact, one of the only insulins that has failed in clinical trials in the past had an enhanced growth factor capacity. Our insulin, it takes 6 times as much to have the same level of growth effect on cells as regular human insulin does. So for people who need to take high doses, this will be a much safer insulin. That's really just a side note to the main value proposition that we have. Now, I mentioned that this is going to be ultra rapid acting, and here's the evidence. We do these studies in pigs because pig skin, which is what the insulin is absorbed out of skin, is very similar in structure to human skin. And in this study, you can see that the absorption rate, the action of our insulin in the green is virtually identical to the action of one of the rapid acting insulins that's just come on the market called Fiasp. So basically the same as Fiasp on speed of absorption, but we have this 6-month stability. And this is important because it allows us to pre-fill existing insulin delivery devices, something that can't be done with existing insulin because they're just not stable enough. If you filled it, the device would be shipped to the pharmacy. When it arrived at the pharmacy, it would say, put in the refrigerator. It comes in a box this big because you're shipping 4 of these devices at once. And the pharmacy says, I have no room in my small refrigerator to put this big box, take it back. So the only way that you can effectively get distribution is with a stabilized insulin. We've been talking to all of the companies that are currently making insulin delivery devices. They're listed over on the right here. Tandem, Medtronic, Insulet, EOFlow, Kalido, Terumo. All of these companies want to be able to pre-fill their devices so that they can sell the insulin and ship the insulin along with the other supplies for their patients, but they can't do it today. With our new insulin, they'll be able to do that. So that's a significant opportunity and a new distribution channel for this regular concentration form of our stabilized insulin. The real differentiator, however, for our insulin is that when you concentrate it 5 times, it's still ultra rapid acting, as you can see on the graph on the left. So what we have is an insulin that's 5 times as concentrated, so you can shrink the reservoir that it goes into in a device by 80%. It's still fast acting, fast enough to make any of the pumps or any of the delivery systems today work as well as they need to, and it's stable. These 3 characteristics are what make the stamp pump device possible. So let me turn to that now. So here's the challenge we're trying to address with stamp pump. Existing insulin delivery devices are just too obtrusive. For people who don't want to advertise the fact that they have diabetes, and that's basically almost everyone except perhaps for Sierra Sanderson here, they don't want to have to wear a pump that has a big device with a tube that goes to an infusion set. The Omnipod from Insulet has made a big difference by getting rid of the tube, but it's still quite large, and you still advertise the fact through this bump that you've got underneath your clothing that you're wearing an insulin delivery system. The stamp pump, however, will be different. It will virtually disappear under clothing, as you can see on the right. Here's what we've designed. It's 75% smaller than an Omnipod with an ultra-low profile. It will come factory filled with 600 units of concentrated insulin. That's enough for 90% of type 1 patients and 50% of type 2 patients for a full week. It will last a full 7 days, be extremely simple to apply, automate dosing of both the base level and the bolus required of insulin throughout the day, and be stable at room temperature for up to 6 months. The initial device will be highly intelligent. It will have sensors on board to monitor activity and heart rate and stress levels and other things that affect insulin sensitivity. It will get the data on what the blood glucose level is in the initial version from a separate continuous glucose monitor that it will communicate to with Bluetooth. But the second version will have the CGM built in. So a single device, the size of a silver dollar, will completely manage your blood sugar for a week, and then you throw it away. It will be connected by Bluetooth to a mobile device. That's going to be the interface. This thing is just too small to put a user interface on. And the fact that it talks by Bluetooth to the mobile device allows us to ship data up through the mobile device to the cloud. Now, getting data to the cloud is important because it allows us to then consolidate that data and report that data to insurance companies in order to be reimbursed now based on actual outcomes of treatment. Today, the very complex kit that people have still means that they have to buy insulin on a unit-by-unit basis. So insulin is sold on a unit-by-unit basis because of our formulary-driven PBM-based system today. This has led to very high rebates going to the PBMs on insulin, 60 to 70%. And the consequence of that has been very high list prices, a lot of stress by people who are underinsured or uninsured, and a lot of political pressure on insulin. But we're planning on changing this paradigm so that you'll no longer be charged on a per unit basis, but rather will be reimbursed based on how good a job we do at managing people's blood sugar, which is the key to improving outcomes. So this is going to radically transform this. The value-based pricing of insulin has been a policy goal for years. The bipartisan Congressional Diabetes Caucus back in 2017 did a study, how do you get the value-based reimbursement on insulin? And they concluded that the technology infrastructure didn't exist to do it today. Well, this system will create that infrastructure for the first time. So that's the second major revolution. It's going to be a revolution in adherence because this small device will be so much easier to use, and it'll be a revolution in economics. The third revolution this is going to create is a revolution in how the disease is managed. Now, because this data is getting uploaded to the cloud, it can be made available to physicians who can look at what's going on with the patient in detail and use that information to much better coach the patient on how to manage their blood sugar. It's going to give you a continuous stream of data all coming out of this one device. So your decision to wear your Fitbit in the morning or not isn't going to be relevant because you're going to be wearing this device because you need it for your insulin. And the physicians will get a much more complete dashboard full of information to help them in caring for patients. This means that this is the missing link in digital diabetes disease management that many companies like Gluco and Livongo have been pursuing for years. So these are the three key innovations that this system is going to enable. Where are we with this device? Well, we have an overall design that was funded by grants from DARPA and from the NIH. The three key components of it are the reservoir, which you can see the circular part. This arc here is the actual pumping mechanism, which is a MEMS-based pump on a chip. Will be produced at high volume, low cost, high quality. The reservoir we've been working on the design for, as you can see, built out in more detail here. Is designed for high volume filling. If we only are adopted by 10% of the patients and only those with type 1 diabetes, we'll have to make more than 1 million of these a week. So being able to fill this at high volume is being built into our design strategy from day one. We've designed out the first version of an applicator. We've got 3D models of the applicator. We've got a 3D model of the pump itself. And we've got a working model of the whole system with all of the electronics built here. Our next step is to take this and put it into what I call a right-sized device. This is my dissected frog prototype. We have to put all the parts now back into the frog. This is a medical device development program and a drug development program because we're working to deliver what's called a combination device. So it's a multi-year effort to bring this forward to patients. But there is a key milestone that will take place in the 2023 timeframe, at which point we will have the phase 1 study completed for the insulin. In phase 1 for insulin studies, you get full clinical proof of efficacy. So that's a major milestone, a major key piece of data that you normally don't get until after phase 2 in other drugs. Secondly, we'll have the working right-sized prototype for the stamp pump. And then we will be prepared to go forward into the full approval process over the next couple of years with submission for approval in 2024 and 2025. Now, I mentioned that there's a major milestone in 2023 because with these two things, proof of human efficacy and the working right-sized prototype, we have the opportunity for, first of all, partnering with multiple device companies that have expressed interest in partnering with us on factory filling their devices. We have a major pharma that's committed to work with us on the insulin itself, and they've asked for right of first negotiation to be able to potentially license that. So the second option we'll have in 2023. Stamp pump, when we've talked to all of these device companies, they've all expressed interest in potentially taking over the development of that program at that point. Or we think that the story we'll have at that point is something that we can use to access the public markets.
Hey, Rick, a couple questions. Can I jump in? First of all, people want to know what's the battery life on this thing?
It's going to last at least 7 days.
7
days. So you'll replace it once a week.
Okay, great. And what about data privacy?
So this is going to have a full encryption suite going up to the cloud and also inside the system.
I think that's my question. Yeah.
All right, great. Please interrupt for more questions. I just have a couple more slides to talk through. So one thing I'd like to observe about insulin is that normally when a drug is about to enter phase 1, it's got a pretty high risk of not getting all the way through the approval process. In fact, if you look at oncology drugs, which are very hot today, obviously, because oncology is a critical area for advancement in drug treatments, only about 5% of them make it from submission, from beginning phase 1 all the way through to approval. Metabolic drugs, about 15% of them make it all the way through. But for insulins, historically, about 58% of them have made it through. And if you take out I'll call it the high flyer insulins, the glucose responsive, the liver targeted ones that have failed, the success rate is actually much higher. And so compared to a normal drug investment risk, the risk here is much lower. And this is because the pig model is so predictive of what's going to happen in people. Obviously, it's not zero risk, but it's very different from a binary outcome kind of risk that you would normally see in a drug development effort. So we are raising, we need about a total of 22 million. I should note that on Saturday, we received a $3 million grant award from the NIH to advance the development of T1123. I should mention that Sanofi has invested in this specific program in the past, and that we have another major pharma that's going to participate and be part of this round to support the preclinical and early clinical development of it. So we're looking to bring in about $22 million more. The goal is to get to these milestones, and we have additional grants that we have submitted that we think will help to supplement this as well. So just to conclude quickly, this is a tiny wearable, sensor-laden, smart, connected to combination device that's built around the world's only fast, concentrated, and stabilized insulin. There's a separate opportunity to factory fill existing insulin devices that has a lot of interest from major device companies. We've got the potential to disrupt the treatment, economic, and disease management paradigms in this large industry with a strong team, and we're looking to raise money currently on an extension to our Series A financing with participation from a major pharma to get within the next 3 years to a key value inflection point. So at that, and with apologies for being, I think, maybe a minute or so over, I would welcome any additional questions that people have. I would also note my email is at the bottom. If you're interested in learning more, please reach out to me at rick@thermalin.com. That's insulin with thermal up front because of our heat stability. rick@thermalin.com.
Thank you so much, Rick. I have to spend 1 minute on listing people. Do I have William Gale? William? I think I have William. Great. And Heather Fraser. Heather? And do I have Will Manidis? Perfect. Great. Well, again, Rick, thanks so much. And we're going to get your video released next week. And we'll get you all the contact information of the different registrants. And we'll send information to you. I think there are a couple of inquiries asking for contact. So we'll forward it off to you later.
That sounds great, Marty. Thanks so much.
Great job. Thanks so much.